Good morning and welcome everyone. My name is Nina Patel. Today we will be discussing secure and mitigate fraud risk through document imaging and automation. We will be going over the fundamentals and process of how it works. At the end of the webinar, we will have a Q&A session, so please feel free to take notes and type in your questions. Let me share a little bit about who we are and what we do. DLCP Group is a woman and minority-owned company with a focus on implementing, migrating, hosting, and managing business solutions on AWS. Our focus is to be more involved and innovative in our community and make a strong impact. Our vision is to continuously grow, educate, and help our clients around the world to meet the business challenges of today. We are very proud of our diverse staff, from women, minorities, and disabled. Take a look at our percentages. Our company brings culture, success, and leadership. Here is our services portfolio page, which highlights our 3 areas of expertise: advisory services, infrastructure services, and application development services. As you can see, each portfolio highlights of what we can offer for your business. Some of our company highlights include a proven track record of successful migrations, co-authoring the definitive white paper on using Oracle applications on AWS, and building the adapter connecting Canon's AP automation to PeopleSoft. Let us begin by me introducing you all to Bob Singh, who is in the sales division for Canon. Welcome, Bob.
So my name is Bob, and today I'm going to talk about how to secure and mitigate fraud risk through an effective document imaging and process automation solution. I will discuss some of the trends and talk about some of the metrics that can ensure success with your digital transformation initiative. I'm also going to talk about some questions that you may want to ask yourself and your organization to gauge whether your company is spending too much time on activities that are wasteful and maybe harmful to their bottom line. Do your processes seem like they're becoming more complex? Are you concerned with the lack of visibility to your projects, to the spend, and to your cash flow? But first, I want to thank Nina and DLCP for allowing us to present to you today. And thanks everybody for joining us. So first, let me give you a little background on who we are. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Canon. We have been around for about 80 years or so. Some of the things that most people may not know about us: we've consistently been rated as one of the most admired companies in our category. We are also rated as one of the most ethical companies, and we are always a top patent earners in the United States, usually in the top 3, but definitely most certainly in the top 5 in the last 30 or so years. And what that really means is that at the heart of it, we are an R&D company. You know, we are constantly innovating, we're constantly adding more functionality and improving our solutions. So that's Canon in general. Now, the group that I belong to and the folks that you'll hear from today that we belong to is called Canon Information and Imaging Solutions. So we are a relatively newer company, about 7-8 years old, and our goal is to offer process automation and document and information and data management solutions to the enterprise. So we are a strong Oracle partner. All our solutions are Oracle validated integration certified solutions. Which means basically that we have the highest level of integration with Oracle. And when Oracle updates or puts out a patch to their ERP, we will continue to operate as expected. And we have wonderful partners like DLGP who we partner with and who we are who help us in implementing our solutions. So let's talk about fraud and risk. Here's a metric according to the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. The average U.S. company gets hit, takes about a 5% hit to their revenue due to fraud. So that's a huge metric. The example they gave was a company with 8.5 billion with over $400 million in fraud. Now just multiply that number, the 5% number, with your annual revenue. You may know what the actual exposure to your company is, but I can tell you, to a company like Canon with an annual revenue of about $35 billion, give or take, depending on the exchange rate with the yen, that's almost $2 billion if we did not have systems in place to curtail that. So let's talk about business risk. So according to a study done by Forrester, procure-to-pay remains one of the most complex business processes involving resources and interactions with many departments, increasing the risk of fraud, data leaks, and other maladies like that. Unfortunately, many organizations find themselves in a reactive rather than a proactive state. So while organizations may have been keenly aware of the risks across each of these areas, combating them can be difficult. So growing regulation and compliance requirements, internal and external risks, and keeping up with the daily activities creates an environment where controlling risk may be extremely difficult. So according to this study by Forrester, between 68 and 80% of the respondents to their survey, and these are C-suite executives in the finance and accounting space, were very concerned, either concerned or very concerned about these risk factors that you see on the right side of the screen. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm sure these are not new to you. So let's look at accounts payable today. Very few companies have standardized their accounts payable processes across the enterprise. The average cost to process an invoice is extremely high in most cases. So according to the Institute of Finance and Management, according to a study done by them, here are the actual numbers. And you can see that it goes from a low of about $1 to all the way up to more than $15 an invoice. Now, of course, the $1 metric is where they have very high level of automation, and the $15 or $18 metric is where they have no automation. Everything is done manually, sneakerware. So one of the reasons that the report, this particular report suggests maybe because of inefficiencies and the lack of standardized processes across the company. So for example, a branch or one subsidiary will not follow the same approval process as the headquarters. And this may be for a variety of reasons. That could be due to organizational structure or the regulatory constraints that vary from one location to another. Another country, another region has different requirements. But ultimately, these variations are a cause for greater complexity that the accounts payable department then has to accommodate. And one important metric, and you can see on the right side of the screen the metrics about how they're taking in invoices. About half the invoices are still coming in on paper through snail mail or fax, but I don't know what that percentage is on the breakdown, but let's just call it snail mail, half the invoices. And it's also a known fact, according to Forrester, that 10% of those invoices that are coming into organizations will be processed with an error when it's a manual process. That 10% can be a huge number. So the problems with manual, oops, my screen didn't change. There we go. The problems with manual paper-based processes are that the audit information is not readily available, the SOX compliance is hard to meet, there's no way to prevent documents from being destroyed, for example, or misplaced. And it's very difficult to track the status of any invoice at any given time. So your accounts payable staff is fielding calls from vendors trying to locate an invoice and the payment status. There's no tracking of invoice history. There's no way to ensure that the employees stick to an approval policy and that there is a clear separation of duties, and there's no chain of custody. So these are some really serious concerns that your organization probably faces. And that data from accounts payable processes will be needed across your enterprise. So again, another study showed that the C-suite is very concerned on the availability of that data and how that data will change. And 77% of financial executives believe that there will be more use of accounts payable data across the business for more analytical reasons. And none of the respondents said that the use would decline. That's a really important metric. Okay. So how at risk is your organization? So fraud detection often involves, bogus suppliers, fake purchases. For example, a different remittance address than what is actually in the vendor master file. I've seen instances where somebody would add a care off or a care to, and then totally read out those invoices or a different bank account number than what is in the vendor master file. So there's several different ways on how fraud can perpetrate. 16% of accounts payable departments have suffered fraud losses in the past 2 years, according to another study. So now that we've kind of discussed the exposure due to fraud, risk and fraud, so let's talk about how does automation deliver on supporting the priorities and pressures faced by accounts payable organizations. So automation eliminates many of the time-consuming tasks associated with processing purchase order-based and non-purchase order-based invoices. Invoices from any delivery channel and in any format, whether it's paper, PDF, EDI, XML, or any other format, are received into the organizations, and they are digitized and they're standardized and aggregated into a single platform. Intelligent data capture technology automatically extracts the supplier, header, and line item level data, such as the dollar amount, part number, and description, and so on, from invoices that are then received in the organization as via paper or electronically, as the case may be. Invoices are then matched with a purchase order and or receiving documents, depending on whether a two-way or a three-way match process takes place. Invoices that require approval, such as non-PO based invoices or exceptions handling, are digitally routed based on pre-configured business rules and workflows. And automation ensures that invoices requiring review are always sent to the appropriate person. So automation eliminates the possibility that invoice will get lost or misrouted or misfiled, or that it will get stuck on the desk of an approver who is out of the office. I know you all are anxiously awaiting the demo, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about just a couple more things. Automation helps in mitigating fraud by finding duplicate invoices, non-approved invoices, and detecting unusual activity, as we discussed. So here's a list of some of the things that help mitigate fraud and automation, and I'm not going to go through the whole list. So here's some of the benefits of a good accounts payable automation solution. The best accounts payable solution will not only support your current needs, but your future needs as well. And that's really key because hopefully you're in a growth mode. Beyond the efficiency gains and savings that may be a widely known benefit of automation, there's an entirely new level of business intelligence that can be gained as a result of the information flow being visible, accessible, and reliable. Your accounts payable department can go from a cost center to a profit center. I mean, that's really powerful. The ROI is tremendous. And visibility into invoices and payables, not only for the accounts payable department, but also for procurement, planning, customer services, sales, and other corporate stakeholders. It allows them to make timely and accurate decisions. And enabled by the visibility is the real-time spend analysis. As I mentioned, the metrics, the analysis, and the analytics, which can help in sourcing, for example, what-if scenarios, with supplier consolidation or diversification, improve contractual compliance, and better supplier relations. So as a result, accounts payable departments and accounts payable functions can evolve as they no longer are considered a cost center and a profit center. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Cliff, who's actually going to talk about our methodology for accounts payable automation and go through a demo. Take it away, Cliff.
Thank you, Bob. I'm sharing my screen now. I expect that you see it. If that's not the case, though, please let me know. In fact, I'll be showing a slide next, just as you were. So everybody, I mean, thank you, participants, DLZP, Bob, thanks for this opportunity for us to present this to you today. So let's talk a little bit about this validation with Oracle, the validated integration status that Canon's achieved. What does it really mean, you may wonder? Well, it's pretty simple, really. Our system, the entire solution has been reviewed by Oracle to confirm that it doesn't, or that it does conform, I should say, to their integration standards. That means that you're assured that with our solution, there's no changes to any of your ERP environments, be it JDE, eBusiness Suite, or PeopleSoft. So that's really the big guarantee there. In some cases, the solution was even jointly developed with Oracle. But at any rate, they reviewed the entire solution, including all of the programming. If I could then, before I do the demo, and that will just start momentarily, you'll see a demo of the solution. If I could just review this little flow diagram here that really serves as a good reference for following along with a demonstration like this and how an automated AP process with a solution like ours would look. If I could just start before maybe explain a little bit about the bottommost swim lanes that you see here. These two areas that are shaded light blue. All of the yellow boxes you see there, they all represent either modules in our solution or steps within a module. Everything you see here is Canon software, completely developed and supported by Canon, implemented by Canon as well. Just to remind you, just so you'll know, there are two families of modules within the solution for AP, Iris Extract and Enterprise Imaging Platform, but it's tightly integrated and all from Canon, seamless really. But at any rate, if I could just start with the process. Externally, it starts with a supplier, of course, even like today. And like Bob mentioned, such a large volume of invoices will still come in traditional means like paper and email. But it starts with a supplier submitting in an invoice or invoices to a buying organization like you see here. Traditionally, it could be paper invoices that are mailed through a postal system. Those would be received and scanned by an AP center. Or increasingly, invoice images are attached to emails that are sent to a buying organization's email account that's set up for that purpose. In any case, our solution completely supports that. PowerScan, you'll see that in the demo shortly. That's a utility that's part of Iris Extract that's really, really useful for scanning paper documents. But we do encourage it, customers and help them any way we can to increasingly have vendors submit invoices through email. That's becoming more and more common and more successful, really. And in that sense, if they're able to do that, or when they do that, there's a component called XML Fetcher that automatically receives those invoices. But as you might expect, after that, there's two processes that run: import, which imports, and analyze. And this is where the real work of the OCR technology takes place, and all that information is actually read from those invoice images and validated as well. Only when it's required. In many cases, it's not, as the system learns about your supplier's invoices. But when it's required, there's a verification step, and that's where an AP person normally interacts with the system, verifying invoices that require it. And you'll see what I mean by verify shortly when we do the demo. Essentially, it means that they're checking that the data that captured correctly, that a 1 is not captured as an I and that sort of thing, or a 0 is not captured as an O. That's rare that happens, but they do verify that. They can make corrections. Generally, the corrections that they make are learned by the system so that they don't have to be applied in the future. But they're also, validating things like date, decimal, and currency formats. Those are often country specific. How the invoice integrates, or I should say, with PeopleSoft in this case, or any one of these ERP systems. For example, the supplier is automatically identified and validated in our solution in the verify step. If there's any purchase order information, that's available for confirmation or matching. And if there's the opportunity to code the GL information, the chart of account data on the invoice, that can be done here at this step as well. But at any rate, once the invoice has been verified, that's required, it transfers out its data and its image into Enterprise Imaging Platform. This is a web interface here built on Oracle's Fusion middleware technology stack. And that's where the invoice really starts to be reviewed, usually by the business side, not just accounts payable. And in that sense, it's often required that for non-PO invoices, they're sent out to someone in the business that knows how they should be coded to general ledger. And that's very common. That's why I show it as a path here on the flow. And when that's done, those invoices are usually approved by that person if they've got authority, or they climb a hierarchy for approval, one or multi-steps. And that's just shown here by the approval step after GL coding. PO matching, you can match to a purchase order and verify. That's kind of common for accounts payable people to do that. But if there's any need to confirm that or to change the matching or anything like that, or if it just needs to be routed to someone else to match within the EIP, that availability is here as well. There's automatic matching too. This is only the few lines that don't meet automatic matching, require manual match. But at any rate, once a PO and invoice is either approved or matched, our solution automatically creates that voucher and that invoice data in PeopleSoft, so you don't have to. That's where the payback really comes from, all the work that was done by this tool in this analyze step. So all those line item table information, if it's got many lines, and all the data that's required associated with an invoice automatically is created in PeopleSoft. We also attach links, which you'll see, to retrieve that content from our EIP repository, so we don't burden your PeopleSoft database with all those images and documents. And in some cases, it's fairly common in the PeopleSoft space. If a customer wants to use the approval engine within PeopleSoft for approving invoices, if they've already got that in place, they're comfortable with it, they can continue using it with our solution. Obviously, you wouldn't have an approval step in EIP if you did that. And if they do use that, they can retrieve the image and all the content that's associated with the invoice. They can retrieve all that in their approval workflow within PeopleSoft from EIP. So if I could, then I think I'll start then with the demo. That's pretty much the end of that process as I depicted it there. So if you would, then I'll sort of follow that path through this demonstration. So I mentioned earlier that invoices, when there are paper invoices being received, that if there's a requirement to scan those into images for feeding into our system, that's available through PowerScan. So you see the PowerScan module open here in the top left portion of my screen. So what I'll do is I'll just set it up already. Got some invoices in the hopper, set it up already to scan invoices specifically for PeopleSoft in this case. And that's what I'm doing here. You do that through the creation of a batch, and then you just process that batch. What I'll do now is create a batch. It's going to feed in those invoices, however many documents, however many pages. Feeds those in like you see here. They haven't been committed yet. They can still be deleted, where they really won't be processed any further. It looks like it's 3 invoices there, with 2 pages, or 2, I'm sorry. 2 invoices there. So if I could show you, with PowerScan, you don't spend a lot of time really in this module, quite honestly. It's really meant just to capture these invoice images quickly. There are some capabilities here that make it quite useful, though, that can save you time. If you notice here, for example, I'm toggling through the pages in the documents that have been scanned. If I needed to mark some pages as attachments, as you see here, I can do that through that menu. If I needed to delete just a single page or split an invoice or document into multiple documents, I could do that here as well. If I wanted to just scan in an additional page, I could do that. But the next step normally is to process the batch, and I'll do that now. It's actually processing it now. And that's what really commits the invoice documents to be fed into the IRS Extract solution. That's where they're imported. Now, like I mentioned, it's sometimes required for invoices to be verified, and it's usually an AP person, an AP clerk, or invoice processor that performs that role. And that was the job list that I just opened up, and it's like that person's queue, if you want to think about it that way. I've opened up the job list, and I've chosen an invoice here as an AP person to verify. So this is what the verification screen for the Windows client looks like. It's also available through a web interface. But you'll see, obviously, the pages of the invoice. If there's multiple pages, they'll be in this leftmost window where action can be taken. The actual image of the current invoice and the current page that we're on is displayed here, of course, in the middle section that you can see. And over to the right, you'll see the data fields that have been either defaulted or captured directly from this invoice document, or in some cases looked up in another source like PeopleSoft based on the information that was captured in the document. Just want to point out, this list of fields here is completely configurable. This is only about 25 or 30%, if even that, of the fields that are available. It's just a minimum set of fields that I usually do to create an invoice in PeopleSoft. If you want to add something additional like payment terms or pay method or anything like that, the banking information, like you see I've added here, is simply a question of turning on that feature in the configuration. There's no special programming that needs to be done to achieve that, which makes the system obviously really supportable. So if you notice here, I can zoom into the document a little more. I can zoom into that upper left-hand corner to show that supplier information real clearly. And if you notice there, I'll talk just a little bit about supplier identification. What the system's actually doing here is it's taking the address information that it finds on the document and it's comparing it to what's in PeopleSoft, and you'll actually see those values in PeopleSoft in the blue shading here. And it's finding a match, so it's automatically identifying this as the supplier and the supplier location for this invoice. Additional data from the PeopleSoft Vendor Master or whatever ERP system that you're using can be used to perform that match. But that's what it's using just in this case. It's using the street address information that it finds a match on. So you might wonder what would happen if this wasn't the correct vendor. I'll just put my mouse focus in that vendor number field there. If I press a hotkey at this point, once my focus is in the vendor number field that was automatically populated, you'll see it brings up a search grid down below. Now there's only one hit in this search grid because this is actually the PeopleSoft Vendor Master that I'm searching down below. And I searched it with a criteria that the vendor ID equal what was already there. So it just finds the vendor that was found, but I could clear that out, like you see here, and perform a broader search. And you'll see all of the vendors and suppliers and supplier locations that are in PeopleSoft. So if you need to make a correction to choose a different supplier and location, you can do that from this list down below because it's looking right into PeopleSoft. You see there as I filter it, it filters and just limits it to the vendors whose names start with the letter T. And you can even scroll all the way to the bottom right, second to the bottom, you'll see the original vendor that was identified on the document. I'll just choose that vendor, not to change the vendor for the purposes of the demo. So here then, you'll see how that supplier correction can be made. That's how supplier correction can be made. So if you notice here, as you toggle through, I'll just focus now on the fields that I consider straight capture. As you toggle through the fields here that are just captured off of the document and validated, for example, you notice a little blue shading, kind of like that supplier information that appears on the document image there, just as a visual cue to help someone quickly relate the two if they're looking at it, inspecting it, and just kind of spot checking it. Makes it very quick to do that. The invoice number is one of the fields that of course, exhibits that. And you'll see that's captured here. You might wonder what would happen if a field couldn't capture for any reason. Maybe it had a label that was not not a standard label, or something that was really unexpected for a given field. If you're wondering about that, if you notice I just cleared out the invoice number field, and this is essentially how I would look at it. It wasn't able to capture, but to capture it, it's as simple as just touching the mouse, the invoice image with your mouse. You notice I'll touch that yellow shading on the document there, and it automatically populates it. That's really useful, but what's even better is that if I simply press a hotkey, certain hotkey at this point, it automatically learns that, which is what that message just showed, that the system's been trained to recognize an invoice number from this place or this proximity to this label, or regardless of what that label is, or according to that new value that we actually captured, I should say. So that gives it the ability to capture that field going forward with no more intervention. So the bill to information is also on the invoice. We're not really capturing that, but you'll see it here. It's actually using it to look up the company. So here you'll see that this, if we just apply a little human knowledge to it, you see that we're being billed for one of our companies. A person named Ivan is ultimately responsible for it, but it should go to this person, Blanche Caldwell, first for review. So we'll just do that then. If you notice there's a contact field there, we'll just pick Blanche from that contact field. And there's an approval policy that could default to this organization, but I can choose them on the fly in this demo. If you notice, I chose an approval policy called Warehouse, and I'm going to send this out to this person, Blanche Caldwell. I'll do that now, and any field can be corrected by hand as well. If you notice there, the invoice number field, for example, I could just enter a couple letters after it. As long as it's not a duplicate, and we'll check for duplicates, it'll flow on through. That's it. I'll commit that invoice to feed it on through, and then maybe we'll just pick another invoice here. Here's one with a purchase order reference. So we're still in the verify module like the last invoice, so I won't repeat too much about that. You will see this is from a different vendor. That's really important, which I guess for our sake and our purpose, what might be even more important is that there's a purchase order number on this that's found on this invoice. So you'll see that here. As I toggle into the field where it's been captured, you'll see the yellow shading to indicate where it was captured from on the document. That's really important. It makes it a completely different type of invoice, really, as far as processing goes, if you want it to be different, because there's the ability to match it. So from here, you definitely want to make sure that it is a good field number, and this is validated. I can tell it's valid because there's no error message associated with that order number field that you see captured, 282. That order actually exists for this supplier. If I were to just show how it could fail, as I toggle back, take out the 2, or put an X in, you see that the PO doesn't exist looking like that for this vendor in PeopleSoft. So that's one way that it validates it. And then if you needed to choose, if you wanted to, I should say, if there was a requirement to confirm this vendor, or you knew it wasn't right because it wasn't found and you wanted to look up and make a decision to match this invoice to a different purchase order, then you can simply press a hotkey here, and it will actually bring you down into the vendor detailed information to make that choice. Now here, we can actually match this invoice to a purchase order manually, and that's already been done automatically here though. What I did was I toggled down to the invoice line details, and you'll see at the top section there, you'll see the line item table from the invoice image. Down below, you see those lines that were captured and how they automatically match to the purchase order. I can tell in this case by the order item value and the schedule number value. Those are the 2 attributes that PeopleSoft needs to really do the match when the invoice feeds in. But these automatically match according to rules that we've got in the system that are based on quantity and price. There's about 5 different rules that come out of the box for automatically matching invoices. So I didn't have to do anything here. The lines captured, the invoices matched. But just to kind of give you an idea of how this could look, if there was an additional line that needed to be matched, I'll manually insert a line here. And when I press a hotkey, you'll see it's going to actually query up the PeopleSoft PO details. So this is where I could actually pick the line I wanted to match to. Let's say I was being billed for this roll of furling that I haven't used yet. If it hadn't automatically matched, I could just pick that line to match to. Rather than do that, I'll just delete the line that I originally entered there. We'll go back to the invoice header, and we just commit this invoice to. So now these will flow out into the business, is how I usually think of it. It could be an AP person, but in many cases it's not. It could be a business user that are handling invoices today, but handling them in the manual fashion more than likely. So what I'll do is I'll log into EIP. This Blanche would have also gotten an email notification, but she can always log into the EIP console, if you will, to see the invoices she has access to. If you notice, I've done that, and actually that PO invoice that we processed through, if you notice, it's actually feeding into PeopleSoft right now, because since it matched to an approved PO, there was no need for us to manually match it. So it's touchless after that point of verify. No more to do on it. It was already matched. But if you notice here, we did send an invoice out intentionally to Blanche Caldwell to review either add coding or review coding on, because it didn't have a purchase order. That's the one that Ivan Barrow should be approving. So if you notice, when Blanche opens the invoice in EIP, she can see from the detail screen, supplier level information, top left, invoice header level information, and total amounts here towards the right. The actual attachment that goes along with the invoice is available here as well. And you can actually, from here, open the invoice image from here, simply by clicking that link. You can view that. And if you notice that this one actually had default accounting, you see that GL distribution section there for the total accounting of 490. That's default accounting that were set up. Let's just suppose that Blanche decided this should really be coded somewhere else. She accomplishes that by first editing the invoice. You can see the image is displayed here as well. But as she scrolls down, she could add an additional account if it had to be distributed further, like you see down below there. But in this case, we'll just change the account that was already entered. If you notice, as she starts to enter that accounting string for the GL number, it's filtering it according to the values, only the values that are enforced by PeopleSoft, or that were validated against PeopleSoft, I should say. So she can only see those values, can't enter anything else. Guaranteed to be validated. So I've changed the accounting there. I'll update the invoice. I can submit it now if I wanted to. It would be a really fast way of doing it. But I would like to show you maybe just one more thing. The warehouse approval policy I mentioned, you might be curious about how that works. Basically, the person that I submitted this invoice to is not a manager at all. Blanche Caldwell here, she's not a manager. So the way the policy is written here, or code looked up, is that if an invoice is for less than 500, a manager could approve it. If it's greater than 500, the director has to approve it, but they have to be in the same division as the invoice data, or as the previous person in the workflow as an option. So here, what happens is she's not a manager, so when she submitted it, it's going to climb to the manager in that division. I just happen to know that gentleman, Ivan Barrow. So if you notice here, once she submits the invoice, and as you notice, if you look at the invoice there, as I refresh my screen, you can see that the status is going to change and the assignee. Before I even go anywhere, I'm still logged in as Blanche, but now the status is that the invoice is pending approval, and the person it's assigned to is Ivan Barrow, like I mentioned. So before I go on, I can now show all my invoices, of course. I want to just take a quick peek at that PO invoice that processed all the way through, since we didn't have to touch it. So I'll go back and undo my filter that just shows the invoices that I need to work on my queue, and we'll just bring up that other invoice that we processed through verify. See there, it says there that it's created in PeopleSoft. You'll see the workflow history there, which is useful. It's already sitting there. And there's the how the invoice matched. If you remember, we saw that automatic matching that happened when we reviewed the invoice in Iris Verify. There's the voucher ID too within PeopleSoft. This invoice needs no further attention. I just want to show it to you. Now log in now, if I can, as Ivan Barrow. Should have gotten the approval notification on the other invoice. Now, I'll limit it just to my queue, the ones that require my attention. I can approve this from a list. I just want to show you that, how efficient this can be. If you notice here, from this invoice list, I can take certain actions directly on an invoice by invoice basis, directly from the list, or I can perform other actions for all the invoices that meet that criteria in one fell swoop, like you see here, for all that are actually checked on there. I can perform that action, be it to approve or reject, whatever the case may be, just to show you how efficient the system can be, how usable it is. What I'll do here is I'll just follow along with the demo flow, and I'll open that invoice that we coded to that we said needed coding, the non-PO invoice. So it was already done. Coding was changed. There was a comment where the user asked the approver to attach a document, and if you notice, I'm just complying with that request here as the approver, to show you how the supporting documentation is often used in real life. There you see a directive document associated with the invoice. Although it's not the invoice image, but the directive statement can be reviewed like I just showed there real quickly. But here, really, to make this quick, I can just approve this invoice. That's all I really need to do. Once I do that, if you notice, it runs in real time. It doesn't batch them up or anything, but it takes a few seconds, maybe sometimes 30 seconds or something like that, whatever it might be. But here you'll see that it's actually created that invoice in PeopleSoft. If I were to just open it now, you see the status has changed to PeopleSoft voucher created. There it is, the whole workflow history. The invoice is in PeopleSoft. It can be retrieved either in workflow or in normal voucher and invoice screens. And this is all same true, really almost identical functionality to any ERP system that we work with, like EBS or JD Edwards as well. But this is, of course, PeopleSoft. There you see the complete workflow history with all the main steps that took place, the time and date stamp associated with each one of those steps. And there's the comments that were captured during the process. And that's just another way to look at the workflow log there. Again, you'll see the voucher ID there. If I were to click that link, it'll navigate me directly into PeopleSoft so that I can see the image and related content that's associated with the invoice in PeopleSoft. You notice here, and the screen can come up automatically. Notice the content is there, displayed in that panel to the right, and this just links those little blue text that you see there. It's simply a link that we attach to the invoice through related content services in PeopleSoft, but the content itself, all those images and all that, that's stored in our EIT repository to make everything more efficient. So really, that's it for my demonstration. I'd like to again thank you for the chance for me to present this today, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll turn it back over to our colleagues at DLZP, though, for any further steps.
Sure. I think we're at the Q&A part of the discussion. Does anyone on the call have any questions? So one question is, can you handle multiple PDF attachments or with multiple invoices in it, or does it have to be one invoice per attachment? Cliff, do you want to answer that?
Sure. It can be either. It can definitely be multiple invoices in one PDF file. There are rules within ours that can be configured to separate those into separate invoices automatically. And there's a special process for any exceptions that need to be handled, that need to be separated electronically. That is supported in an automated fashion as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Another question. The steps that you did earlier where you were kind of reviewing the invoice and making corrections to it, if it had no errors, do you still have to do that step?
No, I tried to kind of work that in, but I was saying it might have not been clear. The verification step is only required for invoices that don't analyze in a completed status. So obviously, I always show it in demos, or there'd be less for me to show for people to see. If invoices just flow through automatically. But as if you notice how I trained the system, both when I had made a correction to the supplier and the correction to the invoice, as invoices first come in from suppliers, if there's anything that needs to be corrected, like those corrections I made, you simply press a hotkey at that point, and that training is captured for that supplier. So in the future, as you process invoices, especially for the same supplier, the system will analyze those in a complete state, which means that you have the option of those bypassing verify and flowing straight into EIP.
Okay, so in summary, if I kind of summarize kind of what you just said, if the invoice doesn't have any errors, it will flow through Iris, through EIP, and directly into PeopleSoft as a completed voucher ready for payment in one foul swoop with no user interaction whatsoever.
That is definitely possible.
Okay, perfect. Okay. The last question is this use of scanners. How do our scanners in our office integrate into this solution?
Well, it doesn't require any specific scanner or any specific scanning software per se. If you were scanning from an MFP device, and for those that you don't know, that's like a combination printer, scanner, and fax usually. Those are usually on a network. If you're scanning from one of those, it just has to be configured to dump the images from those scans into a file system that the system will automatically recognize. If you're conversely, you could set up a special email address to scan to from a device like that, and it would still feed them in the same way. If you're a type of site that has a really large volume of invoices and has or wants to invest in something like a high-speed scanner, then that's where the PowerScan module that I showed would come in, and it would be used to directly connect to that high-speed scanner, and you'd have very, very robust capabilities associated with scanning paper documents in that scenario if it's warranted.
Okay, so I think to summarize your response, you have the capability for a very simplistic approach where it could just be emailed into the Iris Extract application, or you could have some higher volume scanning capabilities for little mid-size type company, or if you're a high volume where you have thousands upon thousands of invoices, then you would have a more robust scanning solution deployed to support you.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all the questions for today. I guess we'll hand it back to you, Nina, to close it up.
Great. Well, I really want to give a special thanks to Ken and especially Bob and Cliff for joining us, as well as our VP of DLCP, Dave Brunet. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, guys. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time for joining us, and please feel free to reach out to us. We appreciate your time and have a wonderful weekend.